Hello and welcome to the Oregon Business Matters podcast, brought to you by Oregon Business and Industry, your statewide chamber of commerce. At Oregon Business Matters, we focus on insights, issues, and initiatives that impact Oregonians' shared prosperity and the state's economic health. I'm Angela Wilhelms, President and CEO of OBI, and your host here at Oregon Business Matters. And today I am thrilled to be in downtown Portland talking with Paul Snyder, the CEO of the Oregon Symphony. He took over that role last year for an organization that turns 130 years old this year. The Oregon Symphony is Portland's largest performing arts organization, and it performs to hundreds of thousands of people each year. Many of them see the symphony perform in Portland's Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall, but there are other locations as well. And today we're going to talk with Paul about the business side of the Oregon Symphony, which is, after all, a complicated and large enterprise. And of course, we'll talk about the connection between this large arts nonprofit and the broader economic picture here in Oregon. So Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Angela. It's great to be here.
Okay. Well, just to get us started, why don't you do a quick just overview of the Oregon Symphony for our listeners? What do they need to know at the start of this conversation?
So the Oregon Symphony is a world-class orchestra. As you mentioned, we've been around for 130 years. We're actually the oldest symphony orchestra on the West Coast. We employ 77 musicians, and we have about 45 board members and about 50 staff, with about a $25 million a year budget. We perform over 100 performances a year, and not just classical. We've got a bunch of popular offerings, things like just this week, where our orchestra will be performing with Rick Ross, or movies, or kids programming, and all that kind of thing. So we have a really wide range of offerings that people can come down to either Arlene Schnitzer Hall. We also play in Salem. We also play occasionally in the Research Center to, quite frankly, just experience all the different things that they can, whether it's classical music, popular stuff, movies, and all the rest. We are the number one driver of foot traffic to the downtown core at night. So we also have not only a cultural calling, but also an economic calling in terms of how we impact the local area. We take that really seriously, and we lean into that where we can.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that statistic. So you are approaching your first anniversary as the president and CEO of the Oregon Symphony. You started as interim president in July of 2025, and then were appointed formally to the role in the fall. So this has been a busy year for you. How's it gone? Any surprises?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you take a new role, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Things that I did know that have been confirmed is just the quality of our orchestra. It really is just world class. The engagement of our board and our staff is just terrific. So those things that I knew going in have just been further confirmed with the things that we've done. Surprise that we've had, people have really responded to this argument that we're making, or this pitch that we're making, that if you want to invest in the downtown core directly, the Oregon Symphony is one way you can do it. We just had our most successful gala ever. We just received a big grant from the Murdoch Trust. So people are seeing us as a way to drive vitality to the downtown core, even quicker than I thought it was possible for, quite frankly, this community to really hear that argument and respond to it. So that's been a really, really great surprise. But a lot of things, honestly, have not been that big a surprise. I've worked for most of my career in private industry, and honestly, the lessons that I learned there are really helping me here. Be clear, I'm not trying to turn the Oregon Symphony into General Electric or something like MBA-ish like that. But certainly the things that are important about how you run an organization, leadership, culture, organizational values, all those things hold true between for-profits and non-for-profits.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. So you just mentioned it, but if you could tell the listeners a little bit more about you. I know that's generally not what you like to talk about, but I'm going to ask you the question before we get back to some of the symphony. So do tell us a little bit about your private sector experience before this.
Sure. So I spent most of my career in the hotel business. I actually started as a bartender at a Holiday Inn outside Chicago, and then worked my way up through leadership positions on property.
Okay, I just have to interject that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I knew that you were in hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't actually know that. And I am now just having this amazing, imaginative moment where I can only imagine some of the, odd conferences you might have been exposed to, or the classic kind of almost out of a sitcom scene of the bar at the Holiday Inn after the convention meetings for the day.
Oh, you know it.
Yeah.
There are lots of stories for sure.
I bet. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean
That's
to interrupt.
okay. And let me be clear, I was a bartender. I was not a mixologist. Like what I see happening behind bars today just is fantastic and mystifying. I was slinging like Miller Lights and Doers on the Rocks. There was no mixology. So yeah, I worked on property, and then I went and started work for corporate. I worked for Marriott Corporation for a while in marketing operations roles, and then I went back to Holiday Inn, to the master franchise organization for Holiday Inn, which was Intercontinental Hotels Group, and I was there for 17 years. And again, bounced back and forth between marketing and operations roles, and then started to develop this side hustle around what became known as corporate responsibility. And so after a while, they said, well, why don't you just do that full time? And so I was the first VP of corporate responsibility that was based in the Americas division. And I was the global chief sustainability officer of the company. I was also head of all government relations. Left the hospitality business in December of 2017 and did some consulting for a while, which I really found boring, mostly because I didn't have a team, right? And so then I had an opportunity here in Oregon with the Tillamook County Creamery Association. My wife spent her high school years in Corvallis. We've been coming out here for a long time. We always wanted to live in Portland. And so at the time, Tillamook was hiring what they called an executive vice president of stewardship, what most people call executive vice president of corporate affairs. So I had the corporate responsibility platform, including all of our sustainability work and our community impact work, also our communications group and our government relations group. And so that's what brought me out here to Oregon. And I was doing that for 5.5 years and then left in December of 2017. That's when I joined the board of the Oregon Symphony, which then led to this. And then just to overlay on top of that career track, I'd always volunteered for arts organizations. I was on the board of the Atlanta Symphony, the Atlanta Opera, the Portland Opera here before I was on the Oregon Symphony board. So arts and the performing arts have really been sort of like my volunteer focus for most of my life.
Yeah, well, what a cool way to see all of that experience on the business side and the volunteer side come together in this role. So thank you for that. Okay, so let's talk about the symphony for a bit. When people hear that word or hear orchestra, they probably invoke an image of, a bunch of folks generally dressed in black, sitting on the stage playing Beethoven's Ninth, which is beautiful. And that is part of what the symphony does, and it does it really well, to be sure. But it's so much more than that. And you touched on this in the intro, but talk about how the symphony's programming has changed over the years.
Sure. Well, the way we think of it is the Oregon Symphony is an orchestral institution. Now, classical music is really at the heart of it, that tradition of these pieces of art that have endured for centuries. That's really the core of what we do, but we're about much more than that. So obviously there's what some people call like the modern canon, so the new pieces that are coming up. We've got some great ones coming for that next year, including we're going to be premiering a piece by Gabe Kahane. Andy Kehoe is coming to play with us at the end of this season. That's a local composer too. So we see a calling not just to raise up all orchestral works, but also highlight Portland folks as well. With Carolyn Shaw also is someone who we're going to be performing a piece by next year. So there's the old works, the classical stuff, there's new stuff, and then of course there's what some people might call the alternative stuff. That's when we play with the Decemberists, or when we just played with Lettuce last weekend. I mentioned Rick Ross coming up, and of course there's the movies, which it really is a neat experience. If you haven't seen the movies yet, the visceral experience of hearing the music being played live with the soundtrack, combined with the fact that you're watching a film that you likely love and have watched 100 times at home alone, to experience that with 2,000 other people, whether it's Pirates of the Caribbean, or it's How to Train Your Dragon, or it's Jaws coming this June 5th, or next year Princess Bride. It's a really neat, different kind of experience. The last thing I would really point to also, which is a really important thing, is the work we do with young people in education in the community. We have a real focus on bringing music and making music accessible in the lives of kids in our town and in our community and throughout the state. We have kinder concerts where our musicians actually go to schools and perform for kids. We had just last week a thing called Link Up, which is a program out of Carnegie Hall where fourth graders actually practice the recorder for a couple months, and then they come into Orchestra Hall, about 2,000 of them at a time, and then they play their recorders along with the symphony.
Okay, that's a lot of recorders.
That is a lot of recorders, but they were great. I mean,
that's adorable.
Yeah, so we have a really wide swath of programming that includes, again, stuff that happens in Arlene Schnitzer Hall, stuff that happens in other performance spaces in the community, and then of course stuff that happens in the schools.
Yeah, Jaws will be just in a few days from when this episode is getting released, and I'm very, very excited for it. We just did an episode with Sport Oregon CEO Jim Etzel, and we were talking about spectator sporting events, games and things, in the concept of this traded sector activity, which is usually applied in the business sense, and it makes sense though in entertainment when you consider how many people come to Oregon or to Portland from other places to spend money here as they engage in that entertainment. So in that sense, he noted that spectator sports and other cultural events like the arts or the symphony are the same. So tell us a little more about the symphony's ability to attract audience members from outside the city or maybe even outside the state, and go back, if you wouldn't mind, to the point you made at the top of the show about the symphony's ability to draw people downtown.
Sure. We do that in a number of ways. So, for instance, when people are trying to decide where to put conventions, they wonder what kind of arts and cultural offerings are in a city where they're going to hold a convention for the conventioneers to engage in at night. And obviously, we're part of that. There's so much a part of the Oregon economy that is growing that's about the experience of Oregon. My friend Bart Eberwein put it really great where he says, look, our natural advantages are food and beverage, our arts institutions, and our natural environment. And those things are really high barrier to entry competitive advantages for us. And so the more that we promote those, the more we draw in travelers from out of state. And again, all of those travelers are bringing in what are technically export dollars, meaning dollars from outside our state into our state. That's why a study that was done in 2022 showed that the Oregon nonprofit arts sector generated over $800 million in economic activity. We really do drive a lot of prosperity here in town, on top of all the people that we employ, and again on top of just the mission that cultural institutions do, which is really bind the community together, help the community heal from times of stress, help the community celebrate times of joy, and that really becomes something that, whether it's the whole arts sector, whether it's the Oregon Symphony or the Oregon Shakespeare Festival or the Oregon Ballet Theater or the Portland Art Museum with its great new Hockney exhibit and everything, these are things that people will travel to come see. And so the more that we promote that, the more that we're going to generate that economic activity.
Yeah, which is so important. And that study you mentioned is a few years old now. I got to think when you refresh that at some point in the future, it will be even bigger because 2022 was, people were still figuring a lot of things out here in the city. Okay, I want to talk about the economic ecosystem a little bit. And keeping an organization like this going is complicated. I mean, you obviously sell tickets and earn revenue from that. But you rely also on the generosity of sponsors and philanthropy. And so, I'm not even going to ask the question because it's so obvious that a healthy private sector is key to a healthy nonprofit sector, and you live that every day. So can you just expand on that a little bit and talk about how you, as the CEO of a nonprofit arts organization, think about the importance of rebuilding a healthy private sector?
Yeah, there's a real symbiosis between the nonprofit arts sector and the private sector. So private sector employers want to attract talent into our community. And one of the key things that people look at in terms of the attractiveness of community are, what are the arts offerings? What is it like actually to live in a city? What kinds of things can I engage in either at night or on the weekends on a volunteer basis or as a patron? The arts really, really matter when you're recruiting talent around town and when you're trying to retain talent from keeping them from ever wanting to leave. So we have a role to play with the private sector in terms of helping them recruit talent. And of course, as you mentioned, they have a big role to play with us in terms of their philanthropic sponsorships or just their individuals who are making philanthropic contributions. I'm really proud of the fact that at the Oregon Symphony, we cover about half our operating costs through earned revenue. So through our ticket sales, that's really, really good in our industry. So the other half has to be covered by contributions from either sponsorships from private institutions or private companies, individuals themselves or foundations. And so we have a really, really thriving philanthropic community here. They're really discerning. They don't like to spend money, they like to invest money. And so we try to give them an understanding about how investing in us is good for with them and what they're trying to achieve, and obviously what's good for the community. But it really is important. We can do all the things that we can do, like around season subscriptions, which I'm thrilled to say we are counter trend to the industry. Our season subscriptions are going up because we've created this choose your own platform where you can actually compose your own series subscription right online. It's almost like gamification. So, we're doing.
Well, now I feel so. I do that. Just full disclosure, I do that. Now I feel a little bit, like I got to rethink my choices. Was I gamified in that? But
no, you're gamifying us.
Who
See,
cares?
you're choosing your custom made for us. So you didn't even know you were Gen Z,
I
did you?
know, I love it.
So we can do all the right things with regard to earned revenue, selling tickets and that type of thing. But there's just no way for us to generate enough revenue from that. We need philanthropic support. That support allows us to support, our 77 musicians, and allows us to support not just our organization, but one thing that I think not a lot of people realize, maybe this goes back to your question, what did I not realize before, is just how big a footprint the Oregon Symphony has with smaller performing arts organizations. Meaning, if you look at some of the small chamber groups around town, and they are great, I encourage anyone to look at Chamber Music Northwest, or 45th Parallel, or Classical Up Close, or Resonance Ensemble, or Third Angle. There's just a whole many of them. I'm sorry for all that I forgot to mention, but a lot of the people that perform in those organizations are our own musicians. And so because we are the ones that provide them the foundation of their career and actually give them health care and a livable wage, they can go and perform at those small organizations, and the small organizations don't have to charge a ton. That increases access to the arts for everybody. So we need those small organizations too, by the way. That's also symbiotic. So they need us to give them musicians. We need them to try the innovative things and do the small stuff and get into community spaces that we're too big for and that type of thing. So that is something that also private philanthropic support helps make possible. So again, everything is a system, whether it's a system between us and private industry, with a system between us as a large performing arts organization and small ones, and we all need to self-reinforce. And when we do, it really becomes really quite spectacular in terms of the vitality of the arts and culture environment here in town.
Yeah, no, I just, and I'll do my own digression. This is not a Paul Snyder Oregon Symphony statement. This is an Angela OBI statement, but you cannot see that philanthropic activity from individuals or businesses if they're not making money, if they're not earning a wage as employees, or if they are not, making profit as a company. And so this is why, we get a little twitchy, if you will, when people talk about, the for-profit community. There's so much good that the for-profit community does outside of its day job, if you will, and we just, thank you for the opportunity to reinforce that. Okay, you've mentioned them before, but I want to talk about the talented workforce you have. Workforce is an issue that many organizations grapple with in some way, finding enough talent, but you have an office staff, an administrative staff, and then you obviously have this very unique set of performing arts employees. And so is it difficult to fill either of those lanes? Are you able to find the highly skilled musicians, the administrative staff? How does that look for you?
Let me start with the administrative staff. So I think some people think, oh, well, people that can't make it in the for-profit world go to the nonprofit world. Couldn't not be less than the truth. There's some of the most talented people I've ever worked with, profit or nonprofit, working in the Oregon Symphony right now. People choose to do this because, and all the research bears this out, it's more than just the paycheck, why people choose to work somewhere. It has to do their sense of belonging, the fact that they're being seen, the fact that they're being developed, the culture that they're not entering and fitting into, but the culture that they're adding to. So there are people who incredibly talented, could work anywhere, who choose to work on our management staff, and I'm so grateful and for that. They're amazing. When it comes to musicians, when we have an open position, unfortunately, it's really not that hard to find fantastic musicians because there are many more of them than there are ensembles right now. The arts sector is under a lot of pressure right now. We have arts organizations that are either scaling back their seasons, or some of them are even shutting down. So that's an unfortunate truth. We're in auditions now for a couple of things. We just have some amazing musicians auditioning for them. And I would also point out some of Portland's natural advantages that it's had over the last couple of decades still come into play. So there are people that are still choosing to play with us when they could play in other symphonies. For instance, there's something called the Big Five. So that's Cleveland, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Boston. Those are generally perceived to be the 5 best symphonies. We've had players from those symphonies actually come to our symphony and play with us because they know the kind of culture that is in our musicians within our symphony corps, which is fantastic. And the Portland natural environment, something about our community has also drawn them here. I'm always incredibly proud and gratified when we'll have a guest conductor who will say, wow, they'll say to the symphony, you all play and perform better than fill in the blank of a top 5 or top 10 orchestra. It's a kind of a secret here in town. We have this enormously talented orchestra. And so when we're trying to fill out positions in there are people that just want to come play with us. And that's why the kind of art that we put on stage, whether it is Beethoven or whether it's a symphony playing with Pink Martini, is just some of the best music you're ever going to hear.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. Okay, so we've talked about the product. We've talked about the people. Let's talk about the place. Most performances, but not all, are in the iconic and beautiful Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall. But I would love to have you talk to folks listening a little bit about that facility. I think the arrangement there would probably surprise most people. It did me.
Yeah. So, Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall, which began as the Paramount Theater and then became Arlene Concert Hall a number of years ago, is an old grand dame of a building. It's first of all, its location cannot be beat. It might be the best performing arts location for a symphony orchestra in the top 30 markets. You're 2 blocks off of Pioneer Square, right in the heart of downtown. It's a big theater, 2,700 seats. And it's a classic, or what you might call a little bit old theater in terms of
classic is good.
Yeah, that's a little marketing there. So this facility is actually owned by the city. And for the past, I think 30 years or so, they have outsourced management of it to P5, which is an entity as part of Metro. So the multi-county governmental entity runs P5, which runs the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall, the Hatfield Center, which has got 3 performance spaces, and the Keller. So that is a little bit different, and that's changing. So Metro has let the city know that they're going to exercise a right that they have under their contract to return management back to the city. And that'll happen on July 1st, 2027, next year. And so the city right now is going through a process of deciding, okay, how do they want to envision and make real the next version of management for the P5 spaces. And so they had a request for information. There were 9 of us who submitted ideas and thoughts and perspectives to that. And then they'll come out with a request for proposal, and then they'll make a decision. They've let us know by the end of this year about how management will be going forward. And so that's obviously something, as the resident company of the Schnitz, the nickname for Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall, as the resident company of the Schnitz, who puts on over 100 performances there a year, we're highly invested in the management of that facility, and how, quite frankly, we work together with the city and whoever's going to manage it and everyone else in our community to, quite frankly, do a lot of deferred maintenance that hasn't been done. And then actually also, how do we think about, at some point, renovating the experience so that we have a world-class facility to match our world-class performers?
Yeah, no, I think it's so interesting, I guess I don't know. I mean, I don't know the politics of all this, but I feel like I should applaud Metro because many government entities aren't in the business of giving away walking away from things, and so having maybe 1 instead of 2 government entities as a partner could be a good path forward. But I hope on behalf of those who do attend events there that the city really takes seriously how to partner with those of you who are using it to think about the best ROI as it takes its next step. One other thing I want to point out, we've both mentioned this, and it is the official name, the Oregon Symphony. Mm-hmm. When you mentioned the Big Five, they were all cities. Mm-hmm. Obviously, this is rooted here, and to our listeners outside of Portland, it is a Portland-based entity. but it is the Oregon Symphony. Why does that matter?
Because arts matters in every community. And, we're still kind of a small state relative to some other states in terms of our population. And so the Oregon Symphony came into being in its present form by combining what was then, I believe, was called the Portland Philharmonic, and then the orchestra that was down in Salem. And that was James DePriest, who was the music director here for many years and really a cultural icon and someone who inspires us to this day. His wife, Jeanette DePriest, is still in town. We see her at concerts all the time. And Maestro DePriest brought these two orchestras together to make one really fantastic orchestra. But an orchestra that was not just for Portland. It was for Portland, for Salem. Again, we've performed out back in the day. We've performed out in Tillamook. We've performed down in Bend and Eugene. We have ambitions to do that again. Again, we've been coming out of COVID and rebuilding audiences and stuff like that. But that's important because no matter where we have played, it has mattered. Whether we are engaging people in the classical canon or in new alternative stuff, again, all of the education work, that is work that is relevant from Hermiston to Coos Bay to Astoria, all the way down to Newport, you name it, it matters in those places. And so we want to make sure that we're serving the needs of those places in terms of what they're looking for in some sort of cultural experience, arts experience, and music to listen to.
Great. Well, this next question may be difficult, maybe like a favorite child kind of question. We're coming up on the transition from the 25-26 season to the 2026-27 season. What are you maybe most looking forward to yourself as a patron of the arts, as far as a concert you're really looking forward to?
There's some great stuff next year. We're doing another Bruckner, which is, big, bombastic, classic German classical repertoire. But I'm also really excited about some things we are doing that are a little bit different than we've done before. We're partnering actually with Literary Arts and the Portland Book Festival that happens in November. And we're actually going to bring in singer, rapper, and author Dessa. And she's going to do a performance with the symphony during the Portland Book Festival. That's a partnership that's really exciting. We're doing some stuff, and there are a bunch of other arts organizations doing some stuff. So Andrew Proctor from Literary Arts is leading that. So it's really neat to be able to join with him and do that. We also talked about our youngest fans, Carolyn Shaw, again, a Pulitzer Prize winning composer who lives here in Portland. She's going to do for our youngest fans a musical interpretation of the story, The Mountain That Loved a Bird. We're going to bring that onto the stage in November. And then I would be really remiss for what I know is going to be the most popular program in my house with my two daughters and my wife, which is The Princess Bride on film.
Yeah, I immediately forwarded that to a bunch of people when I saw that on the site. That's going
to be really, really neat. So yeah, again, it's sort of like pick and choose. You don't have to come to everything. I think we've got enough programming where anyone in our community can find a couple things, or even a large group of things that really is relevant and feeds them. But I also really encourage people, don't just do with those things that you're familiar with. Try some new stuff. I promise you'll be surprised. You'll hear something new that'll be really engaging and really nourishing for you.
Oh, that's wonderful. So where can folks go to learn more about how to get involved in any of the shows or education activities?
Yeah, we have our website, orsymphony.org. I'm really proud of that. We relaunched that website last year. It's phenomenal in terms of the ease of its navigation, where how easy it is to find the calendar where the concerts are, to find background on our educational stuff, or find how you can actually support us from a giving perspective. So orsymphony.org is the best place. And always, just come on down to Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall. We're there, again, 100 nights a year. So come on down, and we have a big board actually outside on Broadway that shows every concert we're doing every season. So just sit there and take a look at that. And so we're always here. We have obviously got a phone number that's on the website too. We've got great patron services people that can answer questions for you. But social media, of course, I have to say that. All the rest of that, even though I don't understand.
Like, follow, share. Is that
exactly right? Yeah. But yeah, so the information is there for you. And look, there's some great third-party platforms that show a lot of the different concerts, not just us, but others, whether that's Oregon Arts Watch or Ever Out, stuff like that. So there are a lot of different ways where you can find us, but the best place is orsymphony.org.
Okay, orsymphony.org it is. Well, we are about out of time. Is there anything you want to leave our listeners with as we sign off?
Um, I guess one thing, one other story from this year. It's been a stressful year for Portland. It's been a really prideful year for us. The way that I think we responded to some of the stresses that came down on the South Waterfront earlier this year. We have an effort we call Music in Medicine, because there's a growing body of research that shows that music doesn't just have an emotional impact on you; it can actually have a physiological impact. Somebody actually did a study where they had people that were post-operative and taking pain medication. You press the little button to give yourself more pain meds. And those that listen to classical music used half as much pain med as those that didn't. And so we saw that really play out when some of that was happening down by the South Waterfront, where we had a concert where our artist in residence, Simone Porter, was playing the Glass Violin Concerto, and then we were doing a Rachmaninoff Symphony in the second half. And the audience clapped in between every single movement. And what that really told us is they needed that moment. They needed this time when honestly the environment was so stressful, just to pause, put down the phones, stop doom scrolling, and just listen to something beautiful. And that is really kind of what we offer. We offer not just a respite from sort of like the maelstrom of the world, but we offer an opportunity for you to connect with a memory that you have of a piece of music that you heard before in your past, an opportunity to connect with a community as you watch Pirates of the Caribbean together, or really you just have an opportunity to just do something that is going to make you feel better afterwards. That's what the mission is, and that's what we like to think we offer every night on our stage.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. So thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for joining me today, Paul Snyder, President and CEO of the Oregon Symphony. Again, orsymphony.org. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. The Oregon Business Matters podcast is a production of Oregon Business and Industry, your statewide chamber. Our episodes can be found on all of your top podcast platforms. So, as we said earlier, like, follow, share. You can find them on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, etc. So for more information about OBI, of course, you can visit OregonBusinessIndustry.com. Thank you very much and have a great rest of your day.